Hey everyone, it's Melissa. Thank you for joining me for the first of a mini vlog series that I am calling Taking the Wheel Wednesdays. This is something that I wanted to just kind of start to take us through the end of 2018 to address some common concerns, questions, just inquiries that I know people have that I've either talked to in person or through direct message, or even just kind of in some of my counseling sessions and workshops as well. I wanted to just continue to engage in different ways and really get back to sharing through video, which is something that I really enjoy, but I kind of got away from recently. So in this mini series, I want to again just be very straightforward and direct with a few topics. I don't want them to be very long, but what I do want you to do is I want you to comment. I want you to ask additional questions. I want you to DM me if there's anything from the video that you want to know more of, or if a particular question comes to your mind. I definitely want this to be a place where every week we engage in just meaningful conversation, we clear up some things, and we move forward just knowing that we can definitely normalize talking about mental health. So let's get started today. Today's topic is, what is counseling and how is it useful? So there are a couple different terms when it comes to counseling that is used just in the general public and even with us as counselors as well. And a couple of those are, you might hear counseling referred to as talk therapy, which means that we're engaging verbally in a therapeutic relationship, but then you also might hear it called therapy as well. And so although there are some very kind of technical and small differences between like counseling and therapy and using those terms, they tend to be pretty interchangeable. And when we're talking about psychotherapy and counseling, we're tending to be talking about talk therapy. So what is that exactly? So when you connect with a counselor or a therapist to engage in talk therapy, psychotherapy, counseling, I think we're going to just call it counseling today. When you engage with the professional to engage in counseling, you have an opportunity to have a safe, non-judgmental space just for you to talk about your thoughts, your feelings, any distressing things that might be going on for you at the time, to be able to have someone who has been trained to listen actively and effectively, and then give non-judgmental and objective support to help you through whatever challenges you might be experiencing. Typically, counseling it tends to be mental health based. And so there can be mental health concerns, but that does not mean that there has to be a mental health diagnosis for you to engage in counseling. And so what does that mean? If mental health concerns are present, but you don't necessarily need a diagnosis. And so with mental health concerns, that can be anything. That can be feeling overly stressed. It can be feeling more anxious than you have in the past. It can be feeling more sad and more down than you have in the past. But going through life changes and responding effectively to things in life by being anxious or being sad or being overwhelmed or being stressed does not necessarily indicate a mental health diagnosis. But for any of those things, you can talk to a counselor or a therapist about just those challenges with what you're feeling, what might be going on in your life, what you might be kind of faced with that is uncomfortable for you, and you want some additional support in that. The reason why counseling is so helpful and useful is because you have a space that's just for you, where you can identify and clarify and acknowledge and start to explore yourself with someone who doesn't have a personal stake in your life. So when you're talking to like a parent or a friend or siblings or anything like that, they have a personal relationship and investment in you. So their feedback might be different in several different ways. They might be highly opinionated because, again, they care about you and they kind of want to see what's best for you, even if they're not quite objective to what it is that you feel like is best for you. So sometimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect between what you want and what the people in your life want. And it can be hard to have these conversations because you don't want to feel ungrateful. You don't want to come across like you don't appreciate their advice or their feedback. But then you also want to honor what it is that you want. There also might be particular challenges in your history when it comes to your upbringing, your childhood experiences, maybe experiences with peers and relationships. You might have an experience where you experienced some trauma in your past, and for an individual, a trauma can be anything, and your trauma might not look like what my trauma looks like, but that doesn't discredit it at all. And so again, having the chance to have someone who's a professional, who is trained to walk you through effectively and safely exploring those different experiences that you might have, teaching you how to process effectively. There's a lot of times when things happen and we're just so on the go that we don't give ourselves the time to actually think about, how does this affect me, and what am I feeling, and what am I acknowledging what I'm going through, and then what do I do about it? How can I effectively respond to it? How can I help myself to cope through this particular situation? Is something that in a normal setting, we don't necessarily just learn and know how to do that. And that is exactly why, counseling can be so helpful. One key thing I want to add before we complete this mini talk on just what's counseling and how is it useful is that you don't have to be in a traumatic situation. You don't have to be in a crisis to seek counseling. People who just want, again, that additional support, that safe space, someone who's separate from their family, their friends, and people around them who have just much more of a personal investment in them, counseling can be very, very helpful in those ways as well. So you don't have to be falling apart. You don't have to be in crisis. You don't have to have experienced a trauma to be a prerequisite for you to participate in counseling for it to be useful. So this was the end of our first Taking the Wheel Wednesdays mini-series. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, again, I wanted this to be short, so I couldn't cover everything. But if there is anything that you want to know more about, that you want me to answer questions about, or if just something came to mind while you were thinking about this, if you've been considering, is it a good time for me to go to counseling, or how will this be helpful in my life? And if this is something that I haven't done before and I don't really personally know other people who have done it, and you want to explore that and ask some questions, please do. You can either comment or you can direct message. And I might even follow up with some live videos in the future to answer some questions live as well. But thank you all. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. And I can't wait to see you all next week for the next installment. See you.